Okay, back again with Cuis Smalltalk, Solitaire, and DropShadows. So DropShadows, when you're dragging something around, we just have flat bits here. We don't really have anything on a flat screen above or in front of anything else. But we like to, our visual system likes to think of things that way when we think picking things up and moving things around and so forth. And when we do that, it's nice to I look at this, I see myself dragging something above something else. Anyway, it's a wonderful illusion. Uh, and so I thought we'd talk about, see how that's done. And so if you happen to know a name, you can, like drop shadow, we can test, we can hit return and then find out that drop shadows, we get a shadow form and card morph and so forth. I'm not going to do anything more here, but just to point out that searching on the names, if we have a method that we're trying to find out, other than implementers and things, if you're not quite sure of the name or method, or you have a partial name or whatever, we can, sorry, delete part of that. This happens to be all things that start with drop sha. Anyway, so the message names, finding lookups on that is sometimes a useful thing to do. And so I'm going to bring up a card morph and yeah, drop shadows. And so here's a show drop shadow. So when you pick something up, you want to show the drop shadow. And so what it's doing is it says, do we have a drop shadow morph as a property? And if not, then we want to set the drop shadow morph, and we want to add that drop shadow to the back behind of us. So the drop shadow is behind us. And so set drop shadow morph. If we come up here, we get an image, and that takes the drop shadow form. Okay, so an image is a morph. An image morph is a morph, and a form is the bits that it's displaying, basically. And you can do things algorithmically and various other things, but what we use is a form. And so it also morphs are in the offset based of their container. So we have a drop shadow offset. So you don't want the shadow directly behind something, because then you never see it. You want to have the sun or the lighting object off to one side, so you're going to poke out a little bit. And then we do set a property of ourselves to this drop shadow. So we can take a brief look at that. So if I drill down here and scaled card morph and get an inspector for that. Okay, we've got some properties. I see I've drug this around already, so there's a move start set. You can ignore that one. But when I pick this up, there's a drop shadow morph set as a property. Now there's nothing here to display at the moment, but you see the drop shadow underneath it. When I drop it, the drop shadow goes away. Add it, away, add it, away. So again, these are the static I should say constant slots for properties, and we have this overflow that's either empty or it's a dictionary of name value pairs, and we can add and remove properties that are idiosyncratic to this particular instance. And so that is frequently helpful. So when I take something and move it around, the temporary period that I'm moving it, we have a way of keeping that form and then asking for that form back to be able to remove it when we drop it down. And so here we are. So hence the show drop shadow, and that adds a property, adds things, and then a hide drop shadow. So when we drop it, then we have to say, do we have a drop shadow morph? It is, okay. we'll go ahead and first remove the morph itself. We remove the drop shadow, the presenter for the drop shadow, and then we remove the property. So we forget that we ever had an extra property called drop shadow morph. So it's just a way of a temporary place to put something. It's just something for this instance. We don't need it around all the time, and so in this particular card, we're going to do that. Drop shadow offset, again, this is just pixels off from the upper left right, which means that we're going to show things slightly to the right and down because the shadow form is offset. And if we take a look at how the shadow form is generated, so there's a bit of business here, but basically what we're doing is we're making a stencil out of the image that we have, and then we're making it simplified and we're making it black, but then we're making so you can see through it. So it's the alpha gives us the ability to see through things, and so if we do it, and you see up here we get, in this case, this is an image morph which has the color black, but it's with a transparency. The alpha is level of transparency. So it's just, we've just made a shadow. And so if you take one of these card images and you put the shadow behind the card image, then what you see is a set of shadows. And likewise, if you are taking more than one, then you see we've got a shadow made for the entire thing that comes together. And so that's the basic bit of business on drop shadows. So it's just figuring out how to make this little stencil form, and you know, if we're doing here, we've got a stack of cards, then we want to make sure we get something that is made up based on the unified thing, so we're not just showing a drop shadow in the lowest card and that kind of stuff. So that's the basic thing on drop shadows. Something else I wanted to show that I'd forgotten about earlier, though, as long as I have your attention here, is undo. I mentioned undo before and I forgot to actually show that. And so if we want to undo a move, if we happen to be at the end of the game, we have to remove the winner text, which we showed when the game was won. We have to say, okay, I'm in undo, because we want to be careful. Sometimes when you're doing things forward or doing things in reverse, you have to know if you're going forward or backing up. And so what it does is it takes an undo object off of a stack. It hands it the value of the table that we're working on, and the table, if you remember, is like a Klondike or a free cell, and we're giving it a closure to execute when it's done, and the closure says, we're no longer in undo. So the table knows if we're within an undo operation, and we want to make sure that after that operation is complete, we're no longer in undo. And so to push an undo object, this is a simple stack that just does push and pop. And if we add a card, when we add a card to container, so what that means is if I come around here, let me, sorry, make that small for a second, and we come here and move things around, and I want to put something up here. Do I have anything I can do immediately? No. So let's just undo. No, it's okay. Restore game. We can, oops, sorry. Start over and let this do its thing. I picked a game with maces on the top just so I could show that stuff. And so if I take something and put it on this card container, then what I want to do is I want to say, okay, if I say undo, I get that back. So I can do it and I can undo it. So every time I do an action here, I want to push a new undo action on the stack of undo options. And if I do undo another one and undo another one, so I can just pop things off the stack and invoke the closures that do that sort of thing. And so that's what this bit of business does here. So when I add a card to a card container, first we say, when we pick something up, we said my current location is where the move start is, okay, and so that's stored as a property. And actually you saw that move start when I was piddling around with this guy over here. And okay, so it first it picks up the move start and then throws away the move start because we don't need that anymore. And then we say if we're undoing, or we're in a card container to begin with, if we're not in undo, we want to remember this in the undo stack. If we are already undoing, if we're getting called by one of these undo operations to pull something off of the pile of that we're building up here, and then put it back on down on the column of cards, then we don't want to say, oh, every object I do, I also push an undo, because then when you undo, you get into that kind of stuff. We don't want to do that. So so we push an undo object, which takes a table, and the next thing it does, and then we tell the table to animate the move from the card container to the original container, moving a card, and we take the next action, which initially is the action which says undo is false, but this is the thing that takes the closure, which essentially takes the current position, adds the delta, moves the card, calls for a redraw, and then does it again and again and again as long as there's something else to do. So that's the clever trick that we do with using a timer with an asynchronous move object, and like that. So that is worth going through. And I guess the only other thing I'd like to note is that sometimes we're debugging, and so we have this transcript object, and if I say open a transcript, where are we here? Here we are, transcript. Okay, and so this is one of these things that you can write to whenever something happens, and I'll try to put this to one side. And I don't like to take these things away, because sometimes after you're debugging, something happens and you want to be debugging again or doing something more. So what happens is, if we're adding a card to a container and creating an undo object, we say we're pushing an undo for the card morph of suit, face of suit, and a new line. Okay, so I want to save that, so I do accept. And oh yeah, yes, I'm Ken Dickey. So it knows I'm the one that's doing this, and my initials show up in the list of versions here, and so I can go back and you see the change that's happening here. So I can revert to the previous version and so forth. So knowing things that went forward means I can make a mistake and back off or whatever, which is a handy thing to do. But right now, let's just go ahead and add that to the transcript. And now, let's see. Okay, well, here's something I can do. I'm not adding anything up to the top. Well, I don't want to play the game far enough to do that. Let's go on this side. Okay, so alright, so if I bring this up, so you see we just said pushing undo for the 3 of hearts, pushing undo for the 3 of clubs, and I take the 4 up and we're pushing undo for the 4 of hearts, and that just gives me a clue from the transcript that that this is happening, and just some clues for myself to what's going on. I can go ahead and do a little thing here to make that back into a comment again. I could have just typed those individually, but if I do a right click, I get a context editor, and I can say help, and so command double quote and closes within double quotes. So the context menus are helpful. These are just the command keys that you can use in a Smalltalk editor. And the Smalltalk editor is something that edits Smalltalk code. And so I can do that, or again, I can take a look at versions, and I can come up here and I can say revert. Okay, make it back like it was, and it just shows that I took that action, and we now have this thing back like it was, which doesn't look a lot from how I changed it, but that's okay. So that's again just a little more of the user interface, and no, let's go ahead and keep those changes. Forgot to accept it. Okay, I made the change, and I've got to accept it, and now we have that. And so that's good probably for this segment. And so next, I think I need to take a look at how the rules are implemented. And so when I try to do something that's not quite legal, that we can figure out how that's known versus a legal move that works for us. And so we'll talk about that next time, and hope you click on the next one. Thank you.